The pen felt heavy in my hand. I stared at the document, then at my husband's smug face across the dining table. "Sign it," he said, "or I'll make sure this divorce drags on for years." I signed. I placed my keys next to the papers and I walked out of my own penthouse without looking back. The next morning, his attorney called him, screaming, "Do you have any idea what you just allowed her to do?" But let me take you back to where this all began. I met Marcus at a charity gala in downtown Seattle 6 years ago. I was 32, freshly promoted to lead architect at Morrison Design Group and feeling on top of the world. He walked up to me near the silent auction table, charming smile, perfectly tailored suit, talking about his revolutionary tech startup that was going to change the construction industry. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. The way he name-dropped constantly, the vague answers when I asked about his actual product, the fact that he always insisted on splitting the bill because equality matters, even though I later learned his credit cards were maxed out. But I was lonely. I had spent my 20s building my career, working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing relationships for promotions. Marcus made me feel seen. He asked about my day. He remembered my favorite wine. He showed up at my office with lunch when I forgot to eat. We got married after 18 months of dating. My mother, God rest her soul, had passed away 2 years before. But she left me 3 things that meant everything. Her vintage Cartier watch from the 1950s, her collection of original watercolor paintings she had created throughout her life, and a handwritten letter telling me to never let anyone dim my light. I kept the watch in my bedroom safe. The paintings hung throughout our penthouse, and the letter stayed in my nightstand, a reminder of who I was and where I came from. The first year of marriage was good. Marcus was attentive, supportive, always talking about his next big venture. I didn't mind covering our expenses while he got his company off the ground. After all, partnerships require sacrifice, right? Year 2, his startup failed. Investors pulled out. He blamed the market, the timing, his former business partner. I held him while he tried and told him we would figure it out together. I paid off the $30,000 in debt he had accumulated without telling me. Year 3, he started another company, then another. Each one required seed money that I provided. Each one collapsed within months. Meanwhile, I had been promoted to partner at my firm. I was bringing in $300,000 a year. Marcus was bringing in excuses. Year 4, he stopped pretending to work. He worked at golf courses. He took business lunches that lasted until dinner. He bought designer clothes because he needed to look successful to be successful. I should have left then, but I kept hearing my mother's voice telling me that marriage required patience, that good men sometimes need time to find their path. Then I found the text messages. It was a Tuesday evening. Marcus had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. A notification popped up from someone named Sophia Chen, with a heart emoji next to her name. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, baby. Wear that shirt I bought you." My hands trembled as I scrolled through their conversation. 6 months. 6 months of "I love you" and "you're the only one who understands me," and "as soon as I get my share of the divorce, we'll be set for life." Sophia Chen. I looked her up. Instagram influencer, 200,000 followers, lifestyle content, and in her recent posts, I spotted my mother's Cartier watch on her wrist. My mother's watch, the one I thought I had misplaced 3 months ago. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw his phone through the window. I wanted to drag him out of that shower and demand answers. Instead, I took screenshots. I forwarded them to my email, and I put the phone back exactly where he had left it. That night, while Marcus slept beside me like nothing was wrong, I lay awake, planning. I thought about my mother's paintings still hanging on our walls. I thought about the prenup Marcus had convinced me to tear up on our first anniversary because we're partners now. We don't need legal barriers between us. I thought about the 5 years I had spent supporting this man who was actively planning to take half of everything I had built. The next morning, I called my college roommate. Helen Park had become one of the most respected family law attorneys in Washington state. We hadn't spoken in months, but she answered on the second ring. I need help, I said, and I need discretion. We met at her office that afternoon. I showed her everything, the text messages, the financial records showing how Marcus had contributed nothing to our household in 4 years, the prenup that he had made me destroy, the photos of my mother's watch on Sophia's wrist. Helen leaned back in her chair. Here's the thing, Alina. Without that prenup, he could claim half of everything, including assets you brought into the marriage if they've been commingled. But I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've learned that the best defense is making your opponents think they've already won. What do you mean? She smiled. We're going to let Marcus believe he's outsmarted you, and when he realizes what actually happened, it'll be too late. Over the next 6 months, Helen and I worked in secret. I transferred the penthouse into a revocable living trust, listing it as my separate property since I had purchased it 3 years before meeting Marcus, with inheritance money from my mother. The transaction was buried in paperwork that Marcus never bothered to read. I restructured my ownership in the design firm, ensuring my partnership stake was legally protected as separate property through a series of technical amendments that my partners gladly approved. I documented every single expense Marcus had made on my credit cards, every investment I had funded in his failed businesses, every piece of jewelry he had borrowed to give to someone else. And most importantly, I installed security cameras throughout the penthouse disguised as smoke detectors. Washington is a 2-party consent state for audio recording, so I made sure they only captured video, but video was enough. The footage showed Marcus and Sophia in my home while I was at work. It showed them going through my closet, my jewelry box, my personal files. It showed Sophia trying on my mother's earrings, laughing about how I would never notice they were gone. It showed them boxing up 3 of my mother's paintings and carrying them out to Sophia's car. The day I discovered those paintings were missing, I nearly broke. I came home to find empty spaces on my walls where my mother's artwork had hung for years. I called Marcus, trying to keep my voice steady. Have you seen my mom's paintings? The ones in the living room? Oh, those old things. I donated them to clear up some wall space. They were depressing anyway. Donated? He had given them to his mistress and called them depressing. My mother had spent decades creating those paintings. They were worth maybe a few $1,000s to an appraiser, but to me they were priceless. They were her hands, her vision, her love made visible. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried silently for an hour. Then I dried my eyes, reapplied my makeup, and continued with the plan. Helen had prepared a special document for Marcus to sign. On the surface, it looks like a basic agreement acknowledging the division of minor assets during our separation period. Buried in the legal language was a clause where Marcus would acknowledge receiving full and final compensation for any claims to property acquired during the marriage. The trick was getting him to sign it without reading carefully. Fortunately, Marcus had never read anything carefully in his life. 3 weeks ago, he came to me with his own demands. He had consulted a lawyer, some discount attorney who had probably told him he was entitled to half of everything. I want the penthouse, he announced over dinner, and half your partnership stake, and monthly spousal support until I get back on my feet. I pretended to argue. I pretended to cry. I let him believe he had won. Fine, I finally said, my voice breaking, convincingly. But I need you to sign this acknowledgement of our asset division first. My attorney says it's just a formality. Marcus barely glanced at the papers before signing. He was too busy texting Sophia about their upcoming victory celebration. That brings us back to where I started. The document I signed 3 days ago. The one that looked like I was surrendering the penthouse. In reality, I was signing a quitclaim deed that had no legal effect because the penthouse was already protected in my trust. The deed was meaningless, but Marcus didn't know that. He also didn't know about the document he had signed, the one acknowledging he had received full compensation and waiving any future claims. The morning after I walked out, Marcus woke up in what he thought was now his penthouse. He tried to make coffee, but the smart home system didn't recognize his voice anymore. I had removed his access the night before. He tried to call building management to override the system, but his name wasn't on the ownership documents. Never had been. The trust owned the penthouse. I was the sole trustee. He tried to leave to get coffee somewhere else, but his Tesla wouldn't start. It was registered in my name, paid for with my money, and I had remotely disabled it through the app. He tried to call an Uber, but his credit cards were linked to my account. All declined. He tried to call Sophia to pick him up, but she wasn't answering. She was too busy dealing with the Seattle Police Department, who had arrived at her apartment with a warrant to search for stolen property. My security footage had clearly shown her removing my mother's paintings from my home. Helen had filed a police report the day before, and the King County prosecutor was very interested in pressing charges against an Instagram influencer with a documented history of receiving stolen goods from a cheating husband. They found everything at Sophia's apartment: my mother's Cartier watch, her pearl earrings, the emerald ring that had belonged to my grandmother, and all 3 paintings still in their original frames, leaning against Sophia's bedroom wall like trophies. Sophia was charged with possession of stolen property and conspiracy to theft. Her influencer career, built on luxury lifestyle content, immediately began to crumble. Brands don't like associating with accused criminals. Her 200,000 followers watched in real time as her carefully curated image fell apart. Marcus, meanwhile, was served with papers at the Penthouse that no longer belonged to him. Helen had filed a civil suit for conversion of property, unjust enrichment, and fraud. We were seeking the full value of every item he had stolen and due to his mistress, plus damages. His discount lawyer reviewed the documents Marcus had signed over the past 6 months and apparently lost his mind. That was when Marcus received the phone call I mentioned at the beginning, his own attorney screaming at him for signing away his rights without reading the fine print. "She played you," the lawyer reportedly said. "Every document you signed was designed to trap you. You have no claim to the penthouse, no claim to her business, and now you're liable for theft and fraud. How did you not see this coming?" Marcus called me 17 times that day. I didn't answer. Instead, I sat in a suite at the Four Seasons with a glass of champagne, watching the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Helen called with updates every few hours. The police had recovered all of my mother's belongings. Sophia had been released on bail, but was facing serious charges. Marcus's civil case was going to cost him everything he had, which wasn't much, but it would follow him for years. "There's one more thing," Helen said. "His attorney is trying to void the documents Marcus signed, claiming duress or fraud on your part." I laughed. Good luck with that. Every document was witnessed, notarized, and reviewed by independent counsel. Marcus chose not to read them. That's not my problem. "Exactly. Their motion will be denied. You're going to come out of this with everything you had before you met him, plus damages, plus the satisfaction of watching him explain to a judge why he gave his mistress his wife's family heirlooms." The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. Marcus got nothing. Less than nothing, actually, because the court ordered him to pay restitution for the items he had stolen and sold or given away over the years. The silver tea set that belonged to my grandmother, books from my father's collection, small things he had taken thinking I wouldn't notice or wouldn't care. Sophia pleaded guilty to a reduced charge and received probation plus community service. She had to return everything she had received from Marcus and issue a public apology. Her influencer career never recovered. Last I heard, she was working at a department store cosmetics counter, a far cry from the luxury lifestyle she had flaunted online. Marcus moved back in with his mother in Spokane. No penthouse, no Tesla, no designer clothes. Just a man approaching 45 with no career, no savings, and a reputation that would follow him through every Google search for the rest of his life. Some people might think I was cruel, that I should have just divorced him and moved on, taken my losses and started fresh. But those people haven't held their dying mother's hand and promised to protect her legacy. They haven't watched a stranger wear their grandmother's jewelry on Instagram. They haven't listened to their husband describe priceless family artwork as depressing. I wasn't cruel. I was thorough. Last week, I rehung my mother's paintings in the penthouse. I placed her Cartier watch back in my bedroom safe alongside her letter that I still read whenever I need strength. I sat in my living room surrounded by everything she had given me and finally let myself feel the grief I had postponed for months. I cried for the marriage I thought I had. I cried for the years I had wasted on someone who never deserved me. I cried for my mother, who would have seen through Marcus immediately if she had been alive to meet him. And then I dried my eyes, poured myself a glass of wine, and made a toast to the empty room. To new beginnings, I said, and to never letting anyone dim my light. The penthouse was quiet. The city sparkled below, and for the first time in 6 years, I felt like myself again. My mother always said that the truth has a way of coming out, that liars and cheaters eventually face their own reflection. She said that strong women don't seek revenge. They simply remove the obstacles and let karma do its work. I didn't seek revenge. I just stopped protecting Marcus from the consequences of his own choices. I stopped covering for him, paying for him, pretending not to notice when things went missing. I stopped being his safety net, and without me to catch him, he fell. Some nights I wonder if I could have done things differently. If I had confronted him about Sophia the day I found those texts, would things have ended better? Would we have had an honest conversation about what had gone wrong in our marriage? But then I remember the way he laughed with her about stealing from me, the way he called my mother's paintings depressing, the way he planned to take half of everything I had built while contributing nothing but lies for 5 years. No, there was no honest conversation to be had with Marcus. There was only extraction, like removing a tumor before it spreads. Helen and I still have lunch once a month. She's become more than my attorney now. She's a reminder that the women we meet in our 20s, when we're all struggling and dreaming, sometimes become the people who save us in our 40s. You know what the best part is? She said at our last lunch. His own attorney basically called him an idiot in court, said he had never seen a client so thoroughly outmaneuvered by their spouse. The judge actually laughed. I smiled at that. Not because I enjoyed Marcus's humiliation, but because it validated what I had always known. I wasn't the naive wife he thought I was. I was the woman who had built a career, earned a partnership, and purchased a penthouse before ever meeting him. I was my mother's daughter, and we don't break easily. If you're watching this and seeing pieces of your own story in mine, I want you to know something. Document everything. Find a good attorney and never, ever let someone make you feel like you're asking for too much by wanting to keep what's yours. My husband thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought a charming smile and false promises would be enough to take everything I had worked for. He was wrong. And now, every morning I wake up in my penthouse, make my coffee in my smart kitchen that only responds to my voice, and look at my mother's paintings on walls that belong to me and me alone. That's not revenge. That's justice. If you've made it this far, drop a comment and let me know what you would have done in my situation. Would you have confronted Marcus immediately? Would you have just walked away and let him have whatever he wanted? And if you've been through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. There are more of us than you might think. Women who loved too hard, trusted too easily, and had to learn the hard way that some people don't deserve our loyalty. But here's what I've learned. The same strength that makes us loyal to the wrong people can also make us unstoppable when we finally redirect it toward ourselves. My mother knew that. She raised me to know it too. And now, finally, I'm living it. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Elena signing off from Seattle, where the rain has finally stopped and the sun is coming through my windows, lighting up the paintings that came home where they belong.